Lots of things at play there.
As you're talking, I think about people that I've known, people that have talked about it for a long time. If you were biracial, you sort of didn't fit anywhere. It was you're either black or you're white. And I'm noticing that the younger generation are finding their voice and they want to fit somewhere. They want a category that speaks to them, which seems very natural and normal to me. And my thought is that they want this category, and that category is biracial. All of those things are true that you've been talking about, but when you say biracial, it covers who they see themselves as, a place that they fit.
So I remember when this whole discussion about having biracial as a category on the census began, and it didn't necessarily begin as a way to give people a space to identify. I saw it more, and some of the research supports that it was more of a way of diverting funding from Black communities, because if you check off, if the census reflects that there aren't as many Black folks in a particular community, or that it's a mixed community, then, resources then are allocated in different ways. And I don't know all the ins and outs and how they allocate the resources with the census. But, with this last census, there was this big push about having people check Black because districts were being affected by the data that was coming out of the census. And so when that category was being added, there was a lot of discussion around what it was going to do to the communities.
It's important that we all know a sense of belonging is critical to human development, and an aspect of sense of belonging is feeling like you belong to your racial and ethnic group, feeling as though you fit in, that you're accepted, that you're respected, that it's mutual, feeling a sense of being home there. The issue is that you can have a sense of belonging to multiple identities. So it doesn't just have to be to a biracial identity. You can have a sense of belonging to other Black folks. And if there are biracial people who have a sense of belonging to white people, that's interesting. And you can also have a sense of belonging to biracial. So identity is not static per se. And you can say, yes, I'm Black, and that's where I identify. And I'm Black biracial, and that's why I identify, but I identify as Black. So it gets to some messiness about some issues. And yeah, the new census data is really interesting. And what I was surprised by when I looked at the new census data under this biracial or multiracial category is the fact that the people, that it's Native Americans and whites, that seems to be the largest number of folks. So I think that's interesting. And then that bolstered the Native American kind of population numbers.
I'm going to jump in here and say I'm really appreciating this conversation, and I'm fascinated by it. What I'm trying to figure out is what I think about it, because there's a part of me that feels like, is it right to deny or to question somebody identifying as biracial? And what I mean by that is the experience of someone, and Helen, you can speak to this better than I can in this respect, the experience of growing up in a household where you move back and forth between Black and white worlds possibly, or you have parents who brought their experiences of being raised white or being raised Black into the household. That gives you a different perspective than somebody who's raised by, one or two people or more who identify as Black only. And so I'm raising this because I want to be careful not to suggest that it's that to say you're biracial means that you're not that you are somehow not embracing, the blackness or and maybe I'm missing something. It seems to me that that if you have a black mother and you have a white father, and this is these are the social constructs that have been created, and black people get to live in their blackness, and white people are living in their whiteness, that somebody who's raised by a black parent and a white parent, has some validity in claiming themselves biracial. Maybe I'm missing something.
I would love to hear what you say about that, Helen, because you've got lived experience, and you leaned in from what you've said. You leaned into your blackness, and clearly, your mom was black. Mm-hmm. You look black. Mm-hmm. You got so if you could talk about that, what was it like for you? And the decision was made for you to identify as black because of the times. How did you arrive at that? Because again, when I grew up, if you had 1/8, 1/16, you were black. No matter how light you were, if you knew that, you were a black person. I hope that was clear. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this is a really interesting conversation. I think there's a conversation about what individuals do, and another conversation that deals with the social political kind of environment. Individuals, of course, should be able to identify how they want, should be able to define themselves in whatever ways that make sense. They should be able to find meaning in their identity and their experiences. And I embrace that. So that is, I want to be clear about. But one of the things that I was responding to as I was listening about, well, what is a biracial experience? Like, is there, I know what an African-American experience is. What is a biracial? Are there biracial communities? Are there biracial this that we live in? In South Africa, yes, they have biracial communities that then created communities. They're so-called color folks. We have Creole folks that are of mixed descent. But I don't know what a history or a community or a culture of biracial folks. I don't know what that means, what it looks like. I'm personally not interested in that. It doesn't mean that other people can't be interested in creating the history for them. The other thing is that the idea about Blackness is incredibly diverse, right? We talked earlier about geographical differences. I was raised in California, which is really different than people raised in the South, Northeast, Alabama. People can have parents who are same gender parents and be Black, and that experience is going to be very different. So there's not a monolithic way of being Black, and they're single parents. So I want to dispel that. And there's people who are Black who were adopted by white people. So it's not, yeah. So I think I made my point.
Yeah, this is such a riveting kind of conversation to be looking at this information. And again, this whole colorblind family of Colin Kaepernicks. I mean, at some point, that's where we would like to get to, where your color is just not an issue, meaning from the racial lens. That's what I'm saying. I love the color of my skin, make no mistake. But from the privilege piece, I would really, and power and disenfranchisement, I would love for race to basically go away. But I wanted to talk about something around a handbook of African American psychology. I think that you participated or wrote. Helen, if you could talk to us about that.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. That came out a few years ago, and some colleagues and I, Brandisha Hines and Sean Yutzi, edited, and it has about 30 something chapters, and we deal with topics all the way from what is African American psychology, what does positive Black mental health look like, what is racial identity theories? There is actually theories of racial identity. So what is a Black racial identity theory? How do parents talk about race to their children? So racial socialization, a whole range of topics that are covered in that.
I would love to get a copy of that. How do I get a copy of that? Because I think that there is something so unique, and I imagine it's very well curated, for lack of a better word. But I'd love to see what's involved in that.
Great.
But Tobie, is there anything that you would like to ask and before as we wrap? Since you're a sister, Tobie, you're a sister. You're a savvy sister.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. I find this conversation so important. And as a sociologist, I just want to add that racial identities are formed in social relations with others. So the fact that you're born into the circumstances that you're born into help shape how you feel, what you explore, what's important to you. And that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you so much for that. And again, I guess a lot of us are just sort of processing what we're hearing, because we're all coming from this from different perspectives. But again, I believe everybody should lean into their Blackness. No, seriously. I think you should just lean into it because it's a beautiful thing. Like you said, it's a joyful thing. And again, this idea of race is a social construct. It's a lie. It is not real. It's just not real. Times are changing. So thank you so much, Helen. And I'm going to invite you back on Brooklyn Savvy, because as we think about this, we're going to dig a lot deeper in here. We're going to dig deeper. And to Brooklyn Savvy panelistas, thank you so much for joining this episode of Brooklyn Savvy. And we'll see you next time on Brooklyn Savvy.